ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how. Well, hello there, and welcome back to yet another FileMaker tutorial where we are going to learn more about FileMaker. My name is Matt Petrowski, bringing you these tutorials from my website, FileMakerMagazine.com. In this tutorial, we're taking a look at the hidden tips and tricks about table view. Some of them may not be hidden, but there's absolutely tips and tricks that you need to know if you're going to be a professional developer in FileMaker when you're dealing with table view. Let's take a look. All right, thanks for joining me here on my desktop, and we are going to be talking about table view. Now, table view, honestly, is not something that I use a whole lot in the presentation of any of my FileMaker solutions. The file that we're looking at right now on screen is, you can access this exact file from templates.fm, and that will redirect you to iSolutions. They had created some templates in order to showcase a theme, the Apex Blue theme. It works really well. It highlights the theme. I use this as a starter for anybody that I am starting to consult with because it's a bare bones, minimalized solution. You can simply just go into layout mode. You can select everything that's here, copy that, go paste it, use it in your own solution, and you have this navigation, this top simple navigation bar, nice little rounded corners, a method to go between detail and list view, which you can see right here, the different views as we click expand and detail. It's very well thought out theme in terms of its presentation. But what we're talking about in this video is the view that we don't use a whole lot in development. Well, maybe you do. It's not an attractive view, but it is an extremely useful view for us as developers, and that is table view. So what we're going to be talking about is all of the specifics about how I use table view, why I use it, and how it actually becomes really useful as a developer, and how you could also potentially use it in terms of integrating it into your solution. It just really comes down to how your end users are using FileMaker. So we're going to go through all of those details, and we're going to be doing it using this, again, templates.fm. If you want to pause the video right now and go download this file, I will be showing you and walking through using this file. Hey there, this is Matt. Thanks for taking the time to watch my free videos on YouTube. This video has been sponsored by what we see on screen right here. Now, if you are looking for hosting, there's a ton of places that you can choose from, but I choose to go with fmcloud.fm, and I'll tell you why. They use the latest technology. Now, I haven't worked with other providers. They may be using the same technology, but I know the owner of fmcloud.fm, Fabrice Nordman. I trust him. I know he knows what he's talking about because his understanding of technology is absolutely solid. Now, these guys are using container-based technology. So every instance of your FileMaker server is completely isolated from another server. How does this benefit you? Well, because of that situation, they're able to provide all of the features, the full features of your FileMaker server. Now, if you go with some of the other providers, you may not have features that you would like to have, such as the ability to run your own plugins. And because each of these containers are isolated from each other, you really have a robust security setup. Now, if we take a look right here, just like any other provider, you can choose from all kinds of different places, anywhere across the globe that you might want to host your FileMaker database system so that your latency is low and all of your clients are connecting really close to your FileMaker server. So if you're looking to set up your own FileMaker server or maybe migrate from another provider, then take a look at the link that I have in the description or on the video or on screen right now at FileMakerMagazine.com/hosting, and we'll redirect you to fmcloud.fm, where you'll be able to take advantage of their great offers. All right, so let's get right to it. So the number one use for table view, in my opinion, as a FileMaker developer, is for you as a developer in order to see what's going on behind the scenes of all of your UI. You can see on this layout that we have here on screen there is no indication of the connections of my primary keys to my foreign keys. Now, when we go up to the File menu and we choose to manage, and we are going to manage our layouts, I always suggest learning the shortcut keys. In fact, of all of the shortcut keys that you see here, I have some additional shortcut keys set. I'm doing this within the control panel or the settings of the keyboard within this Macintosh operating system. Windows has automatic expansions that you can use, and you can extend it with other tools, but it's always nice to have all of your most common expansions for all of your management. But going into layouts, which is a default in FileMaker, we are going to bring that on screen. And what we're going to see in this solution is my number one suggestion with regards to table view is to have a table view layout of every base table. What that means is as we go into define database and we go to the tables area of this solution, we have a bare minimum of 6 total tables or total layouts that are going to absolutely use table view. Now, what this looks like on your relationship graph, at least for me, is I will have a default set of table occurrences that are almost never connected or are always on the area or in the area over here. Now, this particular solution was set up so that you can learn FileMaker, and all it has is more or less what we might be able to consider an ERD. That's an entity relationship diagram. Now, in FileMaker, your relationship graph does not strictly represent your entity relationship structure for your FileMaker solution. It very much commingles the true entity relationships, the structure that you have to have, but added onto that, you always have additional table occurrences for the purpose of UI, presentation, all kinds of things. But for me, what I will end up doing, and I'll just use these 3, you can always reassign table occurrences within FileMaker. And there's a couple different ways you can do this, and I'm going to show you one of the things that I like to do. The arrange tools are always super helpful when you're dealing with the graph in particular, especially if you want to get all of your table occurrences just lined up and really nice. And now I said there was going to be a minimum of 6. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then let's put 6. Now again, working in the graph, this isn't specific to table view, but there's always more to learn about FileMaker. I'm going to left align. I am then going to distribute these vertically, get them all nice and set up. And now I would just take the time and I would simply assign one to each table. Admin, clients, just go right down the line for each of these. Invoices. And because they have the same table name, obviously I am going to have some duplicates here. By the fact that the number 2 is added onto the end of each of these. I typically, there are tons of videos over on FileMakerMagazine.com. I even have some here on YouTube, since this is a YouTube video, about the naming and the way that I name my table occurrences. We won't get into that because we're talking about table view. But for each one of these base tables, I tend to, personally, I name my developer tables actually with a prefix. So down here at the very bottom here, I will put the @ symbol right there. And so I have a list, and they're usually in alphabetical. And you open the graph, and the first thing over on the side is you are going to see this collection of table occurrences, which are base tables, which are all connected to table view. So this is where we get into table view with regards to the layouts. Now, all of this solution, if you've downloaded the invoice solution from templates.fm, they have opted to use their developer tables down at the bottom. Now, fortunately, this solution already does have a developer table for each of the 6 base tables, and each of these layouts is already in table view, which is a really good thing. So essentially, when I start a solution, this, for example, as I double click and I get the layout setup dialog, this would have been associated to my developer table occurrence. That's the table occurrences that we find over there on the left-hand side. And I usually don't do them. I don't use the relationship, the ERD or the whatever is representing my FileMaker solution. I don't typically, as we go into the manage area, I don't typically associate my developer layouts to the table occurrences that are part of the wiring of my solution. I typically leave them all connected to these all the way over on the left-hand side. But there are times when, as a developer, from your developer perspective, you need to be able to see some related information. So what's really nice about this is these tables that we're talking about, these developer layouts, you can switch their context if you need to test things out, and you absolutely will need to do that when you're developing in FileMaker. So what I'm going to do is, for these layouts that were already established here, based on table occurrences that are part of the solution, I'm going to leave them here. But just know that my preferred method is to actually associate these disconnected over in the developer layouts, primarily because when you're developing, especially if you're developing remote, many times you don't want the consequence of what happens when you go to a layout and that layout has connections, and those connections need to gather and show related data. So really, from a developer's perspective, you're usually just wanting to see just the pure data, which brings us into using these particular layouts. So I'm just going to work with one of these, and typically you're working with, I'm not going to use the admin. I'm going to use something that's of a little bit more consequence. Invoices, clients, products. I'll just choose invoices. I'll open that one. If you don't know, there's a nice trick that when you're dealing with multiple layouts, you can select multiple here by holding down the Shift key, or indeterminate, if you are indiscriminate, I should say, you can hold down the Command key, or I believe it may be Control on Windows, and just select a few of those that you want to open, and you can click Open down here in order to open them all at one time. And all of them will open. If one of the windows is already opened, it will just present that window. As you can see, I got only 2 additional windows because one of them was already open. So let's look at this from a data perspective. Products looks like it's probably the one that's the most full in this solution, and that's what I'll use. So what we're going to go through now are the ways that I set up the table view, why I do it, and some tips that you need to know from a developer standpoint. So let's head into that. Okay, so what do you need to know about table view? Because for the most part, we can see table view is pretty ugly. I wouldn't want to present this to my users, but there are some times that you do want to, and there is a way to make this look nice, and you always want to do this for yourself as a developer. When we right-click on any area, I believe it, yep, is it down there? No, it is not accessible down in the bottom part. I'm looking for an option, oh, there it is, right there, Table View, where we are able to edit the properties, reset, or modify. Now, this right-clicking that we're doing here on Table View is always accessible as well when we go into the layout setup itself. So if I'm in layout mode, which I am right now, and the interesting thing that we see about this right now is, as I shrink this up, Table View really doesn't care a whole lot in terms of the dimensions of the layout. You can see that I made the width of this layout super small. It has a header, a body, and a footer. And if you don't know, historically, FileMaker had these 3 parts as the default to any new layout that didn't use the wizard, where you were choosing whether you wanted labels or whether you wanted it to be a screen presentation, what have you, whereas the new default now, I believe, has a top navigation. I'd have to create a new layout, etc., and a bottom navigation, maybe that way. It may also have a header. Now, while we're here in layout mode, what we're interested in is, notice that when we're in browse mode, we actually are seeing fields that are included. This is a very important aspect to this, but as I was stating, in layout mode, the right click that I had made where I was going to edit the table is always accessible in the layouts menu where we go to the layout setup. Now, when we're in the layout setup, we have a tab, views. Views is going to give us our 3 views that are possible on this particular layout. Now, by default in FileMaker, when you create a new layout, most of the time, all 3 of these are checked. If you want to limit the layout to only one or the other, in other words, you don't want to allow the user to, it's not showing here right now, but if I was in browse mode, I would have those 3 options. Let's go ahead and switch it really quickly. We'll go into browse mode. The 3 options I'm referring to are right here of form view, list view, and table view. If you don't want the user to be able to click these to switch them, you're going to have to disable one of those options. So going back into layout mode, going up to the layout menu, going to the layout setup, going to the views, we would be able to say you cannot go into form view or list view on this particular layout, and you can use table view, and here are the properties. So this is our full circle here. In order for me to get to this, you saw that I had to go into layout mode, I had to go to the layout setup, I had to go into the views tab, and I had to go to the properties in order to access this dialog right here. Now that's a lot of steps. I don't know how many. I call FileMaker dialog hell because you basically have a lot of embedded dialogues, which makes FileMaker a little bit easy to learn, but makes it a bit of a hassle up from the standpoint of a developer. But if I'm here already in table view, if I simply just right click, I am going to have access to those same settings right here with edit properties. In fact, right clicking on table view is extremely helpful as a developer when you're developing. We're going to go through many of the additional benefits of table view. So if you need to edit the properties, you can select that right there, and you can see that we get to the exact same dialog right there. Now, where this dialog is helpful is we are now able to use these areas, the top, the bottom, the header, and the footer. Now, all of these are really beneficial to you as a developer because a lot of the times when you're developing, you're working with sample data, you want to do things quickly to data, and that may be running a replace across all of the fields. Now, for me personally, the hard color of these lines is a little bit distracting in relation to the data. I want to focus on the data, so one of the switches I make is I make my grid style lines very light. You can also turn them off if you wanted to. You could also set them to be dashed or dotted if you wanted to. I simply just set them to a light gray. The columns, we always want to, from a developer standpoint, leave them as resizable. If I was showing any images, many times I will use this option, the use custom height, in order to set this to a fixed height value so that I can control how much of a preview I see if I'm showing an actual container. Now, typically, in my developer layouts, as I'm referring to them, that we're using table view here, and everything that we talk about with regards to table view can be used for your user interface if you do present the table view to a user. The biggest advantages from a user standpoint is users can do this. It's just like a spreadsheet. Users can resize. They can also choose on these. They get all of these options unless the options are disabled through your security privileges of whether a user can or can't do it and whether that privilege actually does allow them to do that. If you are using FileMaker from the standpoint of I teach my users how to use FileMaker, as opposed to I use FileMaker to create a custom solution that I don't teach or show the users how to use FileMaker, then of course you have options that you have here, trailing, subtotals, charting, fields, and we're going to get to the additional items that we see on table view with regards to what we can do to that. Now here, as a developer, one of the things that I love doing as I go into layout mode is I will almost always, if you get into the data separation model, and that is where you separate your data from your presentation. You're using 2 or more FileMaker files. It's an advanced approach, but it's got a lot of advantages. It has some disadvantages. Find information about that either here on YouTube or on my website, FileMakerMagazine.com. I will identify, if I'm using the data separation model, where a particular developer table is pointing at, and that is simply using the color that we have here that we can apply to the fill of a particular part. So by selecting the top navigation, I will tend to select a part color, and for a table or for a layout that is pointing to a table that's in the same file, I will tend to use the color green. Green is good, green is go. That means that I know when I come to this layout and I'm looking at the data, hidden data and any other data, I know that green is telling me that it's local. If I'm using the data separation model, then I will use red in order to indicate that that is a pointing to a table that's in a file outside of this current file. And if you've not worked with FileMaker, there are a lot of things and advantages that you can use when you basically show data in one file from another file, but that other file, there's just maintenance issues. It's easier to maintain a strict data file that doesn't have a lot of logic, but you have to get into a lot of other advanced topics using SQL, plugins, etc. Now, one of the things that I do, since we're talking about developer tables, and I sort of think of developer tables in conjunction with table view, is I will almost always create a dedicated theme called developer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this theme right now. I'm going to switch to minimalist. Minimalist starts off with nothing. It doesn't have any extra or excess styles. So by doing that, I have switched this to minimalist, and the first thing that I ever do to the minimalist theme for a table view, for the purpose of me as a developer, we need to get a field on here, is I will add a field. Let's just add the primary key. Where is the primary key in here? Price, there it is right there. We'll drag the primary key on the layout. It is going to throw a label there. I don't need a label. Table view always has columns, so you don't really need your labels. But the first thing that I do by switching it to the minimalist theme is I will, as a developer, mono-spaced fonts are the bomb. They are the best way to look at things. So the default style for a field, the first thing that I do is I will assign that to a monospaced font. Now, I have a preferred font because I'm developing on my machine. I don't strictly go with Monaco or Courier or any of the defaults that are cross-platform compatible. I like to go with something that I like, and that's a Deja Vu. Mono Sans is just one of mine. I've used Ubuntu. I've used all kinds of other ones. I'll set a sane size that I also like for that, and I will simply update that style. So I'll save that current style. I now have the little dot right there that indicates minimalist. The base theme that FileMaker provides has been modified. I will save as a new theme now, and that new theme is, that dialog comes up all over the place. I will call it my developer layout. Now, this is going to become really advantageous to us when we're looking at data in table view. And as I'm going to do right now is because we are going to learn about fields in table view and how we can use them as we develop. This is a very important aspect of table view. I will make this field, actually let me do some other changes I'd make to the field. I always like to vertically center the text in my fields for at least on my developer layout. We'll save those, save that right there. Simply, you just never really want red. I've got tons of videos about theming and red you're dead. I learned that when I had a BB gun. The little switch, the safety switch on a BB gun is, it was always, if it's red, you're dead, meaning it's fire ready. So that's just how I think about it. If I see red on the theme, that's not something that I want to see over there. So setting that now, I get to choose what I want to see for my purpose of using table view as a developer and the order that I want to see things. And this changes constantly while you're developing, because as you're developing, you're creating your UI in a separate layout. Let's create a new window and let's go to, we're working with products. So I'm going to switch to the products layout and I'm going to say details. So this is a very common scenario, what I'm showing you right here on screen. I am designing my layout, but I am also creating features and I need to be able to see what's going on. So at the same time, I need to be able to see a developer layout of my data that's behind the scenes, especially for things that aren't shown, such as a primary key. So for example, I can see I'm on bike black. I can go over here and I go, where is bike black? Okay, well, I need this column to be over here relative to my primary key right there. Okay, bike black. I can see that bike black is A469. I know what the ID of this is. This is more or less a reference point, because when you're wiring up new features in FileMaker, you're constantly working with primary keys because you're creating a relational structure and you're not treating FileMaker like a spreadsheet. you are trying to get a singular instance of something, such as a name, rather than having it repeated across multiple rows within a column on a spreadsheet. So you're constantly using this for the purpose of reference. Now, note, what you're seeing is in layout mode, I only added one field to my table view. Because that one field has changed the default style, you see that I get the benefit across all of the fields. So this is something that we need to talk about that happens that as you're developing your solution, there's many times that you need to see different pieces of data, and many times you want to see related pieces of data. So that's what we're going to talk about right now, is how do you control what is visible in this, and what are some of the benefits? Because as we scroll over here to the side, note that we have this little plus right here. So this is one of the benefits that we get with table view. These are the things that make it easy for us to work with the data that we need to see when we need to see it when we're creating new features. So let's go over that. All right, so let's talk about the fields that you have in table view. What impacts the user in the UI is data overwhelm. If you have a super complex layout with thousands of colors and hundreds of fields, that is overwhelm. You are absolutely overwhelmed. In this scenario, this is a progressive disclosure. Using this picker right here allows me to show a minimal amount of information within this portal and then present additional information by disclosing it when that's actually needed. And that's through the process of creating a script that uses a card window, etc. Well, the same thing applies to you as a developer. Over here in my developer layout table view, I have information overload. Maybe I'm creating a new feature and I have to ask myself, do I really need to see all of these fields? That's where we get into this right here, where when we right click on this and we choose to modify this particular table view, what we have is a list of all of the different fields that are currently being shown. Now note that the only field that I had placed on the layout was this field right here, primary key. Note the little lock. The lock means that I cannot remove this particular field from this table view, but I can optionally no longer see it. So we have a dual situation here. We get to choose what is permanently going to be available in this table view by simply putting the field that we want to see on the layout. My suggestion is what we have right here is I'm going to go into layout mode. Many times on your developer tables, this body, this part can be as long as you want. I could go over to the position tab here and I can set this to, some extremely ridiculously large number is what FileMaker, it'll allow you to create a form that's like, I have, multiple tabloid sizes over. Let's do something a little bit more sane, like 2400 right there. You can see that you could scroll for a long time. Also, one little trick, I always love throwing out little tricks in FileMaker, is if I want this part to shrink up to the bottom of this, really all I have to do is select the part and just put it in a ridiculously small number, and it will shrink to the bottom. Well, in that case, it actually resized past the part. FileMaker, over the course of time, has had some issues in some instances where it just does some things. I'm holding the Option key right now, and I'm able to ghost through that part. Whereas if I don't hold the Option key, you can see that the actual part pushes and shifts things. So there are tricks with layout mode that you can use in order to control things. But in essence, what I want is enough space to add the fields that I want to have so that I can commingle with the fields that I need to optionally see while I'm developing. That's what I'm more or less trying to say. So let's say, for example, I almost always want to see my foreign keys, my primary keys. Let's go ahead and add that key. Let's add the foreign key. Now, it's a little bit difficult to see right now, because I'm making some guesses based on the fact that sample data is turned on. So I'm going to go up to the View menu. I'm going to go to the Show. I'm going to turn off this option of sample data. I have a keyboard shortcut. I can now see the actual field names that I have on my layout. For any other fields that you optionally want to see or not see, what we're going to do is we're going to right-click again, go to that table view, go to the Modify option, and then we are going to be able to hide and show fields that we do and don't want to see. We're also able to put these in the order in which we want to see them. So many times I am going into this Modify many times while I'm developing, and I am optionally adding fields that I need to see. So for example, we've got the, in this particular case, we're on the products table. But if I wanted to see something related, some related data, this is where we get to what we associate a base table to, or what we associate our table to. Remember at the very beginning, I said I typically associate all of my table occurrences, or all of my developer table view layouts, to my developer occurrences. Sometimes it's beneficial to actually have it associated here, but that doesn't preclude us from creating temporary relationships when we are using this solution. So if my table was sitting off of products, my layout, I should say, my layout is tied to this particular table occurrence, there's really not that big of a deal for me to simply create a quick little connection here and say, okay, I know that products is connected to line items. I want to be able to see this information temporarily. I'm going to drag my primary key to my foreign key product right there. So what I'm able to do, and we're going to have to reassign that layout, by the way. I'm going to go into this layout, and this is one of the benefits of whether these fields are literally on the layout or not, is if I go to the layout setup and I now change my context, I am switching from that products, which is part of my, so I'm here, I'm going to change my context to here, which is a completely different connection. Well, in this case, this is the same connection as this connection, but you can see that because this table is a utility table, I'm constantly making these types of changes. I'm going to switch this to my products 2. I have a new context now. You can see that this changed from regular fields to now related fields. If I want these to be changed, I would have to go in and I have to adjust my context, switching it to products 2. Fortunately for us, FileMaker retains the field selection, so it's not that big of a deal. Many times you have to decide. If you have 10 or 20 fields on the layout, what I'm doing right now, by double-clicking the field, having to make another selection, scrolling up to the top, then double-clicking in order to reassign that, if I had a lot of fields, quite honestly, the easier thing is simply destroy all the fields, go over to your Fields tab of your inspector, select whatever you want to include. In this case, it was foreign, and primary. Just say that you're going to take no field label and just drag them back onto the layout. You're going to end up with the same solution as what we had before, where we right-click, we go to Table View, we go to Modify, and there are my 3 fields again. Now, I get to move these wherever I want. I can move them up to the front, and it's going to put them there. But we can see that all of these other fields that were left in here, because I had switched the context, FileMaker is going to retain, each individual object in FileMaker retains its knowledge about itself. These fields that were added to this table view in order to display, remember that they were connected to the table occurrence that I was connected to before. Then I switched the layout to a new context. So if I wanted to add them back, I would have to get rid of them now. And this is where you get to optionally show in your table view whatever you need to see. Number 1, you can keep it short and sweet by limiting it to just the data that you need to see based on the feature that you're working on. And alternatively, you get to show and hook up in your graph, whether you're using a developer table occurrence, and connect just the table occurrences in order to see the data you need and then disconnect them and disregard them. FileMaker is really good about that. So by clicking the plus, we can go to any related table or non-related table and be able to show whatever data we want to see here in table view and be able to have a really good visual as a developer, looking at our primary keys, our foreign keys, how things are wired up, double check, is your script generating the number of related records you need to see? These are all of the things that you can do in table view much better than when you're strictly just looking at your UI. So again, you're always using these dual views, your developer view and then your user view. You're designing your user view, how it works, but you don't want to take the time to mess that up by adding on extra fields or things that don't apply, and look at it in your developer table. So that's what's really advantageous here. This example won't necessarily show or be relevant, but we can see that I get to see what related data I want to see as a result of, whatever it is that I'm wanting to see. And of course, I can rearrange these and move them however I want. So I think I've done a good job of explaining why and how simply just right-clicking, going to table view, and choosing this modify option is actually beneficial to you as a developer. Now let's talk about the reset option. Reset is simply just going to reset according to whatever table view is set up for. So let's go ahead and modify table view. Let's move these down at the bottom. Let's actually put my primary first and we'll put my label. You can see that table view in the background is shifting and readjusting. These are the settings, or this is the setting for this table view for this particular layout, where primary key is first, then I have a related field, then I have my two foreign keys. If in the process of me developing, I want to, for example, see my foreign key right next to this key, this is a local modification to this table view. If I want to put this table view back into the format that I'd like to see it in, right-click, choose table view, and choose reset. That reset is what's going to put it back into the view that I have when I'm actually in that modified dialog. And you can see that it's actually, the reset actually got rid of the field that I had there in the reset is basically, I actually hadn't done that before. I quite honestly add most of my fields. Most of my fields are always tend to be locked and on the layout because I almost always want to see them and I always know that I can turn them off. Reset clearly takes away any field that is not on the layout, which is actually a good thing to know. So if I'm developing and I've added a bunch of related table fields, and remember, you can always make multiple selections. That's really nice to be able to see all of this related data temporarily. I'm designing a feature, and then I just go in and I say table view, reset right down to my base tables. So this is actually, I just learned this for myself. Because I put most of the key fields on my layout in table view that I want to see, that reset actually is a bigger benefit now than how I had been using it previously, because most of the time in my layouts, I actually have all of the fields that I want to see, even my created by, my creation, etc. So let's actually throw those on because that's going to lead me into the very next tip of what I do when I'm in table view, at least when it comes to specific pieces of data. All right, so let's talk about data presentation for you as the developer. If you do not already know, in FileMaker, not all time and date values are created equal unless you are forcing those time and date values into a specific format as part of your auto enter. So when we go into our defined database here, we look at our products table and we have a creation timestamp. This timestamp, if we look at it, it does have an auto enter value on this. It does not have a calculated value. So we are relying on FileMaker to put this time value in. Many times within FileMaker, users can enter dates in many different ways. You can use part of a date, you can use part of a time. You don't have to fill out the full amount. FileMaker will guess, fill in the rest. If you leave seconds off of time, if you put in dots, if you put in dashes, FileMaker accepts a lot of different formats. So many times you will want to force your dates into a strict format when you're developing within FileMaker. But that doesn't get around some of the presentation issues. Since we already took the time to use a monospaced font, one of the things, and at least with regards to timestamps, is I love to see all of my timestamps in a fixed format. And the same thing applies to many other pieces of data where, if you're not already aware, in the inspector palette, there's this fourth area, the data tab. And when we get to that, one of the things that we find at the bottom is data formatting. This data formatting, at least as it relates to numbers, I only really needed one of those. Let's go ahead and put the amount or the cost. I think that's an actual number. Let's look at that. Cost is a number field right there. We can see. We'll say OK. We've got the cost. So when it comes to number fields, many times in FileMaker, it has such a high degree of precision that it defaults to general. But a lot of the times when you're looking at, let's say, a UTC value, something that's really long in terms of a string of numbers, FileMaker will want to shorten that. And typically what you're wanting is this one, as entered. So having a number field that I know is as entered, I know is the pure number in terms of presenting that in table view to see exactly what I want to see behind the scenes. Because there are many things you can do in FileMaker where it's confusing, it doesn't make sense, you don't have the same data type on both sides of a relationship. The data that you're looking at, you think it's one way, but because it's being presented with a setting that you didn't know you needed to change, that also is a problem. But when it comes to timestamps, many times what I will do with date and time is I will force this to a custom time, and that's usually using reverse notation. So you're simply going to go in here and you're going to say, full year date. I'm going to use, let's just use a regular dash, and then I'm going to use the 012, and then I'm going to use a dash, and then I'm going to use the actual day right there. Yeah. I think that's the day right there. And then we'll turn that one to none, and we'll turn this to none, and then we'll turn this to none. For day numbers, we include our 0, and we include our 0 right there. So this is going to give me a consistent date formatting across all of my records, which visually as a developer makes it much easier to see. Now, we don't do that just for the date. We also need to do that for the time. We're going to set custom on that. Actually, we can do hours, minutes, and seconds. 24 hours is typically what you want as a developer. For hours, you want to include your zeros. So in other words, all we're trying to do is we are trying to get this to be consistent. And again, we don't need to go into browse mode to see this. I'm going to use my shortcut key of Command-Shift-S, which I've assigned into the operating system. Not in order to open scripts, but Control-S, Matt, right there, in order to see what the formatting is doing as I'm applying it. So here we can see that I'm in reverse format. Year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds, preceding zeros on all of those values. This consistent time now is what I want to start with as a template. So for any other field that I'm going to add that is a timestamp, or is a date, I'm going to use this field as my template. In other words, if I'm putting the modification, I'm going to copy this by holding down the Option key and dragging, and I'm going to use this now to assign the modification. Otherwise, if I had actually selected and dragged in the modification timestamp, guess what? It's not necessarily going to be in the format that you want. Although, did FileMaker just retain the last settings? They might have updated FileMaker such that FileMaker, when you add an object that didn't used to be this way, I've been developing with FileMaker for 20 plus years, it didn't used to be that FileMaker would use whatever your most recent settings were from the data formatting. But they may be doing that now in newer versions of FileMaker, which is actually really good to know. It used to be that you needed to create a copy of your original and reassign by double-clicking and changing that original or the copy to what you wanted to have. But it's good to know that FileMaker may have updated, or Cherish may have updated FileMaker, and now when you add a new one, it takes whatever previously set settings you had for the data formatting options. But that is very key in terms of using this to be able to see what's going on, because you can see as I size this out now with that white space, this gets really easy to see when things are created. So I sort of sending, and I have a really good idea of previewing my data to be able to see exactly what I want to see, the way that I want to see it. And if I need to see this relative to the name, I just drag, do whatever I need to do in table view. All right, next tip about table view is give yourself tips. Give yourself an idea of what is going on based on what you're looking at. In FileMaker, as I stated, it is very easy to get confused once your solution gets bigger and bigger and more complex. So over here, I can go into my UI, go into layout mode, and I have a really good idea of where things are coming from because I can see this is coming from the table products. This is my table occurrence, and I can see that right off the bat. Well, in FileMaker, you're constantly having to go between browse mode and layout mode and designing things. They changed it up a little bit, which isn't really cool, having these big sidebars show up. It was really nice in FileMaker where when you were designing, it looked like this. They changed it. You would be going between like this. And this was very quick to do when you're designing, going between the two. When they added these sidebars and attached them, it became a little bit lame because doing this is really disconcerting. Plus, you end up many times with this off the screen and you go into layout mode and now accessing it, you have to drag the window a lot more. So if they were ever to give us back our palettes, which they did give us our palettes when we're in layout mode, where we can go to the view and we can show the inspector right here. We can create a new inspector that is detached, but it really only applies to this side of the inspector. It does not apply to this side, which is what we need to get detached if Cherish ever went back the other way. So from a design standpoint, they went a little bit backwards in terms of adding on those. But in layout mode here, what we're going to do for our developer layout or for within table view is give ourselves some clues. So this text that I have right here, we always want to remember that anything about the current environment we have access to through the get functions. So we go up to the view menu the insert menu, and we go to this option right here of other symbol. Now, other symbol is going to give us immediate access without having to create a calculation or anything to any of FileMaker's get functions. Now, this is useful to us because we want to know when we're looking at a table for the purpose of being a developer, what is this table based on? Let's go to the layout, and we can see the layout table name right there. That is going to give us, and let's put in base table, and we'll put in a colon, and we'll drag this out. So we can see without having to go, like as I stated, having to go into layout mode in order to see that this is based on products 2, we are able to immediately see, looking at this layout, what is it based on. So when we go into our manage relationships, we know that this particular developer table is not based off of this, and it can't see these connections. It is based off of this, and it's basically able to see this connection right here, or whatever I wire this up to, which, again, remember, I can temporarily just reassociate this in order to see whatever related data I want to see. I want to switch to clients. I'll go ahead and just switch that right there. I may have to modify the relationship by, adjusting the key values, but that's a very quick fix here where I can then just go right click and, as I stated, go to modify. I could select whatever fields were temporary, delete them with the trash, and just add any new related fields that I want to see. I want to see these fields right here, add them, and they're ready to go in my table view in order to see. Now, in this case, obviously doesn't make any sense, but you can see how quick that was. Just one trip to the relationship graph, reassociate, and then be able to see my related data. This is where you get a better picture of being able to see what's going on behind the scenes of your UI as you're developing. So the takeaway here is, remember, for whatever data you want to see, and also put in, for example, this file, we'll go to insert, we'll go to other symbol, and we will put in file name. If you are using file name right there, and let's go ahead and highlight that, and then let's go over and put the path right here. And we might even be able to just change this. Once you get used to FileMaker, you can actually just type in what you want to see. So we can see right here, file path. Is that actually, I forget whether that is the file path or not. We're going to go to the insert and go to the other symbol again. We're just get to put that. No, file path is actually right. It may not be showing it because I may not be, there we go. I'm not long enough in terms of my size. But you can see these are the things that you need to know when you're developing. Put whatever metadata you want to see in this header area that you've shown on your table view so that you instantly have an idea of what's going on, which is going to lead to one of my last tips, which is going to be using developer-specific buttons in order to enhance or modify your data here in table view. All right, and are you ready to wrap up this video with one of the coolest, best tips that you can get as a developer working within table view in order to work with your data? While you're developing with FileMaker, you are constantly making adjustments to the data, many times working with sample data as you develop your solution. One of the most powerful features in all of FileMaker is this one right here, replace field contents. It also happens to be one of the most dangerous, and a reason you don't want to give users access to this is because they will literally destroy their data with it. So many times the suggestion is to turn this off or make it inaccessible with a menu set that actually removes it. Now, in this particular solution, I happen to know that it does have a menu set wherein I need to go to the layout setup for this particular table view for the layout. It was set to the file default. Now, the file default may be using, and if you don't know where the file default settings is, we can find that under the options, file options, and then actually, no, it's in the menus. Sorry about that. We go to the manage, we go to the custom menus, and then we can see that in the custom menus, the default menu for this file is currently standard FileMaker menus. Now, if it was set to a menu set other than the default, then each layout that is set to use the file default would be using whatever default was set there in the manage menus. But in this case, for a developer layout, I will almost always strictly or explicitly set FileMaker menus because you're developing, you want the full set of FileMaker menus. Now, having said that, as I stated, one of the most powerful features to you as a developer is being able to manipulate your data and being able to see different types of results, especially with regards to using FileMaker's calculation engine. So as I head into the define database and we go to our fields, many times I will have a field in my table that's either called temp or something that is specific to being a developer. Maybe it's called dev, whatever it is. I'm going to call this one temp. Now, most of the time your result is going to be text for that. I am just using this for the purpose of showing you how to deal with using the most powerful, one of the most powerful features in FileMaker, that is the replace field contents. So I am not going to necessarily add that as one of my fixed layout fields on the object here or on the layout. I'm going to simply right click, choose that table view, choose to modify, click the plus, add my temp. It's right there. I can move temp and actually show it relative to my primary key. It moves for me in the background and I have it right here. Now let's say, for example, I wanted to see what is the cost times some number. This is super simple. I can go into this field and I can choose to go up to the records menu and I can choose the replace field contents. But there is a benefit that we have here using table view as a developer if we will simply just make a slight modification. So typically what I do is I will leave the top navigation to be descriptive and information. In fact, many times I will additionally have information about this file, about this table. And here is my documentation. This table is for storing this data or whatever, because in a complex FileMaker solution, you end up with hundreds of different tables with many join tables, etc. So what we want to do is right-click, and we are going to choose this option right here of Part Setup. Part Setup is going to allow us to add the parts that we don't have in here, which in this particular case is the header and the footer. Now, if you remember from the very beginning of this video, the header and the footer is able to be shown in table view. And this header area, which I'm going to select this, and just because I like to make things nice and distinguishable, I will simply go up and make this a lighter gray right there. And I am going to add a button. So this header area on my table view, for me as a developer, is where I put developer-specific buttons for manipulating data. One of those can be replace. Now, one of the great things about FileMaker and single steps, well, this applies to scripts as well, is I can use the replace field contents. Now, typically, when I'm doing a script, I'm choosing this option and I'm choosing specify a target field. I do not have to specify a target field. In fact, by mere virtue of the fact that I omit a target field, FileMaker will apply the replace settings to any field that I am selected within. This is very, very advantageous. You want to leave your dialog on. I do not need to specify replace with. I simply just add replace field contents. I click OK. And so what I have now, and let's go ahead and just make my header a little bit bigger with my replace button, put it all the way over here. As a developer, I have the ability to modify and manipulate my data, being able to see FileMaker's calculation results across a complete range of data. That's where we get into this temp field right here, where normally, if I wanted to see this cost times 2, I might be tempted to do it in this field, but if I do a replace, it overwrites all the data. There's no reverse, there's no undo, there's nothing. It is absolutely catastrophic. So I can simply select in the temp field, click the replace button. It will bring the replace dialog up. I can now choose this option, replace with calculated results. And it is going to allow me to say, I want to take the cost times whatever value it is that you want to do. In essence, I have access to my FileMaker's full calculation engine here. I'm doing it across a temporary field in order to see the result of what I want to get. Again, it doesn't matter. If I select in this field and I click replace, it recognizes that it's in that field and it will actually replace on the cost field. But by using a temp field and being able to select in this button of replace allows me to click and modify my data in any selected field that I want to update or modify the data. Maybe I want to update a field that is used for a value list and prepend a value to all of my data. The replace is absolutely wonderful for that. If I want to see a combination of the first 4 key values with the name, I simply select here, I click replace, I click specify, and I just say left of my primary key for 4 characters, concatenated with the dash, with the name right there. I've got my calculation. I click OK. I click replace. It is done in a temp field, and I get exact results of what I want to see by being able to access that calculation engine with the replace. You can see that it's extremely powerful to be able to use these top areas in the table view to give yourself developer functions or buttons across this whole area that do things for you quickly while you're developing in order to manipulate and modify not just the data, but things that do things within the UI. I will put buttons in here that will modify variables that I'm using that for some reason I don't have them accessible in my UI, but I need to modify them. I just click over to my developer layout really quickly, click the button, modify the variable, etc., what have you. Of course, you always have the data viewer. You can go right to your value and make your modification right there, but sometimes, it's just easier to just simply click a button and have it do something. Which, by the way, you can see the dialog you get. If you do not have a field selected, you just get a nice little convenient dialog, and there it is right there. So the takeaway here is use the header area for all of your buttons for your developer-specific activities to apply to your table view. So, if you have watched this video for the full length, then you have learned most everything that I can think of that you can do about table view. Some of the things that I might have glossed over is there are so many ways in FileMaker to create a field. You can create a field by going into your defined database. You can create a field when you're in layout mode and you go over here and you click the new field. Let's actually get that on screen right there, new field. Another way to create a new field is right there in layout view. This is another reason that's really great about table view. This is your takeaway before I wrap things up, is everything that you have access to in the defined database or in that area when you're in layout mode, you have access to here where you can modify things. You can see that I have access to my field settings. That includes changing my field type on the fly right here from table view. Many times you'll find out that a table is text when you need it to be number, and this is an easy switch. It's a right click, go to the field, go to the field type. You need to access the field options really quickly. You select on your field. I need to update the auto enter on my temp. Field options. I'm there. I don't have to go into manage database. It's a right click away when this layout is right off to the side, this window of this layout of my table view. And lastly, if I need to create a new field, I just simply scroll all the way to the side and I've got my new field. I call it new field. It is now in my database. I right click, I can change the field to whatever type it needs to be. It needs to be a number type, and I need to access those settings right there on the field. I'm going to go right there. Which, by the way, also, if you didn't notice it, FileMaker also gave you the option here in table view within that field to either hide the field or delete the field. I've never really used this hide field that often. Typically what I'm doing is I'm just going to table view modify, because this gives me a cleaner picture of what's going on with my table view, where I can say, okay, yeah, I still want to be able to access this stuff, but I don't want to see it. So I really only want to see these things right here. Just my primary, my temp, and my name. Let's keep it simple. I don't need to be confused by all the other data. I just see those things, develop my feature, etc., and move on. So, as always, I'd like to wish you much luck with your own FileMaker development. I hope this comprehensive overview of table view has given you even more in-depth understanding about developing with FileMaker. And until next time, much luck and happy FileMaking.
We hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and we'd like to say thank you for your subscription and your support. If you're not already a subscriber, head on over to www.filemakermagazine.com/subscribe for more information about the benefits of joining.